They said it was just business. But when a stranger in a charcoal suit told Dr. Elena Brooks she was worth 40% less than yesterday, something broke inside her. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Cypress Road Veterinary Clinic, casting long golden stripes across the tiled floor. Elena had arrived early, as she always did, taking a moment alone in the surgery room to feed Miso, the one-eyed clinic cat who'd outlived every prognosis. She'd just finished updating a post-op chart when Linda, the front desk receptionist, tapped on her door and said, "He's ready for you in the conference room." No other context. No warm-up. The man in the suit, Marcus Reed, didn't even rise when she entered. "Dr. Brooks," he said, tapping away at a tablet. "Thanks for coming. Let's get started." He outlined a new compensation package without a pause, his voice smooth and unemotional. Her current salary was being reduced by 40%. Incentives would now be based on upselling services. Time per patient would be capped. Her reaction didn't even seem to register. "This aligns with market performance under Evercare Veterinary Systems," he said. "We expect standardization across all acquired practices." Elena blinked. "You're cutting my pay almost in half." After 14 years. He looked up for the first time. "Nothing personal. Just business." Elena left the room in silence, but her mind wasn't silent at all. As she walked past exam rooms she'd helped design, she thought about the dogs who'd aged with her, the kids who now brought in pets of their own. This wasn't just a clinic. It was a community. And now it had been sold without her say. At the front desk, Linda's face was pale. "They did it to me too," she whispered. 30% cut. And my hours. Slashed in half. In the waiting room, a young boy played with the leash of a sleepy basset hound. A teenage girl sat beside her mother, nervously clutching a cat carrier. Life continued, unaware that the clinic was already changing behind the scenes. That night, Elena sat in her small kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. She thought about her mentor, Dr. Walter Greaves, who had sold the clinic just 3 weeks ago. At his retirement dinner, he had reassured them. They promised to keep the heart of this place intact. But now she was being asked to erase that heart, to become something unrecognizable. She picked up her phone and dialed his number. "Elena," Dr. Greaves said, sounding relaxed. "How's everything at Cypress?" "They're gutting it," she said simply. "Pay cuts. Upsells. Protocols for procedures pets don't need." There was silence on the line. "I wouldn't have sold if I'd known," he finally said. "They lied, Elena. And I'm sorry." She looked across the table at a framed photo of a Labrador she had once pulled through a harrowing surgery. The dog's owners had sent her that picture with a thank you card that still sat pinned to her fridge. She couldn't forget what this place had been built on: trust, honesty, and care. "I'm thinking of starting over," she said aloud, surprising even herself. Dr. Greaves didn't hesitate. "Do it. The town needs you more than it needs them." The next day, between appointments, Elena cornered Dr. Daniel Vega in the break room. A newer hire, younger, with corporate practice experience under his belt. "Evercare's bad," he confirmed after a quick glance over his shoulder. "I left my last clinic because they made me push unnecessary dental work just to meet quotas. I told them no. They cut my hours the next week." By lunchtime, Elena had emailed a real estate agent. By dinner, she had a list of properties within a 10-minute drive of the clinic. Not flashy ones. Just enough room for a surgical table, a reception desk, and compassion. That night, she made a list. Equipment. Bank contacts. Staff she trusted. Clients she could not let down. And she knew, truly knew, that she was about to light a match that would change everything. Elena Brooks wasn't just thinking about leaving. She was already planning her first day somewhere new. The air inside the clinic had changed. It was subtle at first, a stiffness in morning greetings, nervous glances exchanged in hallways, hushed conversations that stopped when Elena entered the room. Word had begun to spread, though she hadn't told a soul directly. Except Daniel. And maybe Linda, who had an uncanny ability to read everything from a single raised eyebrow. By Friday, Elena had already drafted her resignation letter. 2 weeks' notice. Polite. Professional. Strategic. She knocked on Marcus Reed's door precisely at 9. He was mid-call but waved her in without muting his microphone. His desk, still pristine and impersonal, had nothing on it but a tablet, a half-finished latte, and a stack of Evercare onboarding pamphlets. He ended the call quickly and turned to her with that same smile, the kind that practiced charm but offered no warmth. "Dr. Brooks," he said. "Have you reached a decision?" She handed him the envelope. His expression faltered. "Only slightly, but enough." "You're resigning." "I'm pursuing another opportunity," she said evenly. He scanned the letter. "You know, we expected a little pushback from the junior staff. But from you." "I understand how businesses run," Elena replied. "And I've made my own business decision." He leaned back. "We'll have HR send the formal documents. You'll understand, of course, that client records remain the property of Evercare." She didn't flinch. Of course. But her mind was already elsewhere, on the small office space she'd toured the night before. It used to be a pediatric clinic. The bones were perfect. Clean, accessible, and just far enough from Cypress Road to avoid confrontation. Back in the break room, Naomi Chin was restocking supplies. 8 years Elena's colleague, 5 years her confidant. She didn't speak until Elena pulled the fridge open and sighed audibly. "You gave notice," Naomi said quietly, not looking up. Elena paused, then nodded. "I'm opening my own practice." Naomi shut the cabinet with care, her face unreadable. Then she said, "Good. Because I'm not staying here." That afternoon, Linda handed her a sticky note folded into thirds. Inside, 20 names and phone numbers. Clients. Long-time ones. Beneath the list, Linda had written, "They've all asked where you're going. Sooner or later, they'll follow." Later that evening, Elena met Daniel and Naomi at a coffee shop on the far side of town. It was quiet, dimly lit, far from the eyes and ears of Evercare. They chose a corner booth and kept their voices low. "I found a spot on Willow Glen," Elena said. "It needs work, but the structure is sound. We could be open in 6 weeks." Naomi leaned in. "What's your plan?" "To build a place where we're not forced to push blood work for healthy puppies. A place where old dogs get care without their owners going into debt." Daniel nodded slowly. "Count me in. I'm tired of defending medicine I don't believe in." Naomi smiled. "I've already started packing my locker." They toasted with paper cups, not knowing that the timeline would soon shrink drastically. Back at the clinic, Elena's resignation caused ripples no one could contain. Clients noticed when appointments were shuffled. Some were told their pets would now be seen by Dr. Collier, an Evercare appointee with efficient hands and no bedside manner. Mrs. Harper was the first to corner Elena in the parking lot. "I heard you're leaving," she said, clutching Baxter's leash tight. "Is it true?" Elena hesitated. "Yes. Wherever you go," Mrs. Harper said, her voice trembling, "we're coming with you." Later that night, Elena sat alone with her notebook, flipping through sketches of clinic layouts and equipment lists. The front page now read, "Redwood Animal Wellness." She underlined it twice. But something else gnawed at her. That day, she had noticed a new document in the clinic's shared server, a revised fee schedule. Services up. Packages inflated. Protocols scripted. Standard care was being rebranded into corporate profit margins. Elena didn't just feel urgency now. She felt danger, for her clients, for her team, and for what little remained of the soul of Cypress Road Clinic. She wasn't just building a new place anymore. She was preparing for a quiet rebellion. It began with a file. An ordinary patient chart, until Elena noticed a new note at the bottom. The words were typed in cold administrative tone: primary veterinarian reassigned, Dr. Brooks to Dr. Collier. Effective immediately. Elena blinked. Then she checked another file. Same change. And another. Within 10 minutes, she had confirmed that nearly all her long-standing patients, animals she'd cared for over a decade, had been reassigned without her knowledge. The message was clear. Evercare wasn't waiting for her to leave. They were already erasing her. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear. She opened her laptop and pulled up the email thread with her lawyer, Allison King, a sharp-witted local attorney who specialized in small business transitions. Elena had planned for a quiet launch in 6 weeks. Now, that felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. She typed, "They're actively reassigning my clients. Is it possible to open sooner, even limited capacity?" Allison replied in less than 5 minutes. With temporary equipment rental and creative scheduling, yes. 2 to 3 weeks. Call me at 8. Elena stared at the screen, then exhaled deeply. This wasn't a transition anymore. It was a rescue mission. The next morning, she arrived early to the clinic. Too early. No one else was there. The stillness helped her think. She walked slowly through the halls, past the kennel where she had once comforted a trembling hound through a storm, past the exam room where a child had named her hamster after her. These walls weren't just drywall and paint. They held voices. They held trust. But the place was already hollowing out. Marcus Reed was waiting in her office when she returned from her first appointment. "We need to talk," he said, motioning toward the door. She didn't sit. "Several clients have expressed concern that you're planning to open a competing clinic," he said. "If so, I must remind you of your employment terms." "There's no non-compete in my contract," Elena replied calmly. "It's in the transition documents you signed after Evercare's acquisition." "I reviewed every page with counsel," she said. "There is no such clause. And even if there were, Kentucky law doesn't support non-competes for medical professionals where patient welfare is concerned." His smile thinned. "We've invested a great deal in this clinic, Dr. Brooks. I'd hate to see that investment disrupted." "I share your concern," she replied. "That's why I'll continue treating every patient with the care they deserve until my final hour here." The tension was electric. Neither of them blinked. That evening, Linda texted her again. 6 more clients asked where you're going. One of them cried when she heard you were leaving." Elena looked at her calendar. She had 12 days left. No more delays. By the next morning, she had signed the rental agreement for the space on Willow Glen and scheduled equipment delivery with a local supplier who had already worked with her for years. The pediatric clinic space was old, but solid. 2 exam rooms, 1 surgery room, a break area, and enough parking for 15 cars. She called Naomi and Daniel. "We're opening in 17 days, she told them. "I'll need every spare hour you have." Naomi laughed. "I already bought new scrubs." Daniel just said, "Tell me when to show up." Meanwhile, the clinic's atmosphere grew brittle. Elena was shadowed constantly. Marcus hovered near her exam rooms, clipboard in hand, nodding tightly when she skipped unnecessary recommendations. New pricing posters appeared in every room. Comprehensive wellness packages were now default protocol, bundled services that sounded impressive but rarely applied to healthy pets. One day, Mrs. Lyman came in with Chairman Meow, her arthritic tabby. The new protocol required a full senior panel. Elena had already run those tests 2 months earlier. Is this really necessary again? Mrs. Lyman asked, worry creasing her forehead. No, Elena said gently. Not today. But as she completed the visit, Marcus stepped in. Mrs. Lyman, I'm Marcus Reed, Regional Manager, he said with a polished smile. We noticed the wellness package wasn't included in your visit today. Would you like to take advantage of a limited-time discount? He spoke with practiced ease, layering guilt beneath soft suggestion. Mrs. Lyman looked from him to Elena, confused. Then resigned. She nodded. Afterward, Marcus pulled Elena aside. When we recommend a protocol, we expect you to support it. This isn't about wellness, she said. It's about revenue. He tilted his head. Your emotional investment in clients is clouding your professional judgment. She smiled tightly. That emotional investment is called trust. You should try it sometime. That night, Elena didn't sleep. Instead, she made final arrangements with the equipment vendor, scheduled inspections, filed insurance paperwork, and built a rough patient intake system. She didn't bother waiting to notify her lawyer. The war had started. And she wasn't going to lose. The last day arrived without warning. It didn't feel like a finale. No balloons. No cake. Just a strange stillness, like the breath before a storm. Elena parked in her usual spot at Cypress Road Clinic, but her name was already gone from the schedule. 4 token appointments were booked for her, all basic checkups. The rest had been reassigned. Transition activities, Marcus called it. Final paperwork. Compliance exit interviews. But everyone knew what it was, containment. She walked past Linda at the front desk. The phones are slow, Linda said under her breath. It's Friday, but no one's calling. Elena nodded. Because they're waiting. Marcus summoned her to the conference room at noon. But this time, he wasn't alone. 2 strangers waited inside. One wore a blazer too heavy for spring. The other had a briefcase and the detached eyes of a corporate lawyer. This is Evercare Legal Counsel and our HR Director, Marcus said, folding his hands. The woman slid a document across the table. A cease and desist. It outlines your violation of the regional practice radius. You are not permitted to operate within 20 miles of this facility for 1 year. Elena didn't even flinch. She reached into her bag and placed a folder beside theirs. I brought copies of every document I signed, she said. There's no non-compete clause. My attorney verified it. And Kentucky Statute 311.560 makes enforcement of non-competes for veterinarians unenforceable when patient continuity is at stake. There was silence. Then, for the first time, Marcus looked uncertain. We're not here to argue legality, he said quickly. We just want a smooth transition. Then stop threatening mine, Elena replied calmly. The HR director cleared her throat, trying a different approach. Dr. Brooks, perhaps there's a compromise. A short grace period. We could waive all restrictions in exchange for 30 days of non-solicitation. Elena leaned forward. Make it formal. I'll sign. By 2 o'clock, her tenure at Cypress Road was officially over. She returned her keys, collected the framed photo of her first patient, and nodded goodbye to staff who had already started packing their own quiet exits. As she stepped outside, her phone buzzed. A message from Linda, just overheard Marcus. She's just one vet. How much impact could she have? Elena typed back one sentence, I guess we'll find out. 17 days later, at 7:30 in the morning, Elena arrived at the newly painted storefront on Willow Glen. The sign above the door read Redwood Animal Wellness in clean, forest green letters. Naomi had hung wind chimes near the entrance. Daniel had stocked the exam rooms with supplies they'd unpacked by flashlight 2 nights before. The clinic wasn't finished. The floors still smelled of new varnish. The reception desk was a rental. One of the exam tables was secondhand. But it was theirs. At 8:15, Elena brewed coffee in the break room. At 8:30, she reviewed the first 3 patient charts. By 8:45, she looked out the front window and froze. There was a line. A real line. Clients. Pets. Children holding leashes. Senior citizens with pet carriers. Families with thermoses and folding chairs, waiting patiently on the sidewalk. Daniel came to stand beside her. "Did you call all these people?" he whispered. "I only called 20, she said. "Just the ones with urgent medical needs." Linda logged into the new system from behind the desk. "Word got around," she said simply. At 9 sharp, Elena opened the door. Mrs. Harper stood at the front with Baxter wagging at her side. "I couldn't sleep," she said, stepping inside. "We brought muffins." Behind her came the Garcias and their 3 cats. Then Mr. Ford with his tortoise, Methuselah, wrapped in a towel. By noon, the clinic had checked in 71 patients. By the end of the day, over 160. Every room was full. Every corner of the small clinic buzzed with voices Elena knew, faces from the past returning like waves. But what touched her most weren't the numbers. It was the gestures. A family brought coffee and pizza for the staff. A teenager handed her a drawing of her dog, framed in construction paper and labeled, "Thank you for saving Jasper." One elderly client brought a handwritten card with a check inside for the new clinic's coffee fund. Elena stood at the reception desk as the sun set, a half-drunk cup of tea in her hands, and stared out the window once more. This wasn't just a practice. It was a homecoming. And Evercare had never seen it coming. The call came just after sunrise. Elena had barely sipped her coffee when her phone buzzed with a text from a former colleague still at Cypress Road Clinic. "Emergency meeting. 8 a.m. schedule's gone dead." She read it twice, then tucked her phone into her coat pocket without replying. Across town, Redwood Animal Wellness was already humming with early energy. Naomi was prepping for a dental procedure. Daniel was reviewing lab results. Linda was restocking the new shelves with the last of their overnight delivery. There had been no advertising. No flyers. No local news interviews. Just a quiet opening, and yet every day since, their appointment slots filled faster than they could open them. Word had spread like fire in dry grass. By the end of week 1, they had registered more than 300 patients. By the end of the second week, that number had doubled. Nearly every name came with a familiar face. "We didn't know where else to go," many of them said. "We only trust you." Meanwhile, rumors from Cypress Road Clinic trickled in daily. Longtime clients were calling to cancel appointments. Some showed up demanding their pets' records. Staff were asking questions management couldn't answer. Marcus had reportedly flown in from headquarters to stabilize operations. But it was already too late. One afternoon, Elena received a message on the clinic's website from Mrs. Lyman, the same client who had once been pressured into an unnecessary senior panel by Marcus. "I brought Chairman Meow to Redwood today. Thank you for remembering who he is, not just what he costs." The note made Elena pause. Not because it was unusual, but because it was becoming common. These clients weren't just returning. They were recovering. 1 week later, Redwood had to extend hours. They hired a second receptionist and a part-time vet tech from a neighboring town. Clients began offering help, bringing in donated towels, storage bins, and even an industrial coffee maker for the break room. Elena held her breath every time she looked at the numbers. They were operating at full capacity. The practice was profitable already, something she had told herself wouldn't happen until 6 months in. But still, she felt a gnawing pressure beneath the pride. This success came with weight. People were watching her now, expecting something better. Something lasting. On a drizzly Thursday morning, Elena got an unexpected visit. A black car pulled up outside the clinic. From it stepped Dr. Walter Greaves. He looked older. Slower. But the moment he stepped into the clinic, his eyes lit up. "Elena," he said, extending his hand, "I had to see it for myself." She walked him through the entire practice. He touched the counter with reverence. Read the names on the client board. Watched as Naomi and Daniel moved seamlessly between rooms. "You've created something special here," he said softly. Elena smiled, but there was something in her eyes. A question she hadn't dared to ask. "I made a mistake selling to Evercare," Dr. Greaves said before she could speak. "I should have offered it to you first." "You needed your retirement," she said gently. He shook his head. "But I could have protected what we built." As he walked to the front door, he turned back once more. "This clinic. This is what it was always meant to be." That night, as Elena sat in her office catching up on charts, an email arrived. From Marcus Reed. Subject line, "A conversation." The message was short. "Dr. Brooks, are you available to meet next Tuesday at 2 p.m. to discuss the veterinary landscape in Asheville?" Elena stared at the screen. And then she smiled. She replied with one line. "I'm available. Tuesday at 2 p.m. Nothing personal. Just business." The clinic on Willow Glen was unusually quiet that Tuesday afternoon. Appointments had been scheduled light after lunch, giving the team a rare chance to breathe. Naomi took the opportunity to reorganize the medication fridge. Daniel was in the back reviewing radiographs. Linda sat at the front desk updating client records with the soft click of her keyboard. And Elena Brooks, wearing a pressed navy coat and her sharpest expression, was preparing for a meeting she never expected to accept. At exactly 2 p.m., a dark sedan pulled into the parking lot. Marcus Reed stepped out, his suit impeccable, but his posture less confident than Elena remembered. He stood at the front door for a moment, taking in the modest building with its clean signage, flower beds freshly watered, and a chalkboard near the entrance that read, "Welcome, friends. We're glad you're here." Linda met his arrival with a nod, offering no greeting as she gestured toward Elena's office. The message was clear, "You're here because she allows it." Elena stood as Marcus entered, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. He sat, noticeably glancing around the small room filled with charts, client thank you notes, and framed photos of pets on the walls. "This is impressive," he said, trying a cordial tone. Elena folded her hands. "You wanted to discuss the landscape." He adjusted his tie. "I won't waste your time. We've noticed a significant migration of clients. 70%, according to our data. It's unexpected." She didn't reply. "I understand you've built something strong here," he continued. "Clearly, the market responded. That's why I've been authorized to extend a proposal." Elena leaned back, her expression unreadable. "A merger," he said. "Evercare is willing to bring Redwood Animal Wellness under our umbrella. With full autonomy for your leadership. You'd maintain your staff, your protocols, even your brand name. We'd simply support expansion." Elena's heart didn't race. Her voice remained steady. "So you'd fund me, then wait for my team to burn out. You'd replace Naomi with someone who pushes platinum wellness packages. You'd replace Daniel with someone who cares more about hours per case than outcomes. Marcus shifted in his chair. That's not. It's exactly what you did at Cypress Road, she said. I watched you do it. A pause hung in the air like static. Then Marcus said, you're right. We underestimated you. And we're willing to admit that. It doesn't have to be a war. Elena stood slowly. Walked to the window behind her desk. The parking lot was full. In one space, Mr. Ford was helping his grandson out of the car with a crate on his lap. Inside it, Methuselah peeked out, still alive, still stubborn, still cared for. You made it a war, she said, still facing the glass. I just refuse to lose. She turned back toward him. This community came here not because I asked them to, but because you made them feel disposable. I will never give them back to the people who treated them like spreadsheets. Marcus stood as well. So that's your final answer. It's not a negotiation, she said. It's a boundary. He picked up his coat but paused before leaving. You've made a mark, Elena. I hope you know that. This level of client migration. It's already a case study at corporate. She didn't smile. Then study this. Care comes first. Always. After the door closed behind him, she sat for a moment in silence. Then Linda appeared, holding a small envelope. This came for you. Dropped off by Mrs. Harper. Inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for never forgetting that our pets are family. Attached was a drawing, done in crayon, of Baxter the beagle wagging in front of a building that looked suspiciously like Redwood Animal Wellness. Above it, in shaky cursive, our new home. Elena pinned the drawing on the board beside her desk. Then she picked up the phone and dialed the contractor. We're ready, she said. Let's talk expansion. The contractor arrived the next morning with rolled blueprints and a clipboard filled with permits. Elena met him in the side hallway just beyond the second exam room, the narrow space she had always envisioned as a future surgical wing. It'll be tight, the contractor said, running his hand along the faded wall. But with the back lot cleared, we can add a treatment suite and a small waiting area extension. Elena nodded. We'll need soundproofing, ventilation, and space for a second surgical table. By now, Redwood Animal Wellness was no longer a hopeful gamble, it was a growing force. They had surpassed 1,000 registered patients in less than 6 weeks. Local rescue organizations were referring adopters to them directly. Even the nearby animal shelter had begun requesting consults from Dr. Daniel Vega and his team. But with growth came pressure. Appointment slots filled a month in advance. Walk-ins begged to be seen. Emergency calls came at night. Elena had barely sat down for a meal in days. Still, she kept going. Not just for herself, but for every client who crossed the threshold looking for someone to trust. Yet, the shadows hadn't disappeared. Late one night, after finishing charts, Elena scrolled through a neighborhood Facebook group. A thread caught her eye. Former Cypress vet opens new clinic. Beware corporate backlash. Dozens of comments followed. Some praising her. Some cautioning. A few anonymous ones hinting that Evercare was gathering data, preparing a legal countermeasure, maybe even tracking her digital footprint. Elena clicked out of the tab and closed her laptop. She wasn't afraid, but she was alert. 2 days later, a letter arrived from the state veterinary board. It was formal, cold, and brief. A routine inquiry had been triggered regarding her recent patient migration and potential irregularities in record transfers. She read it twice. This wasn't random. It was retaliation. She called Allison King, her lawyer, immediately. It's flimsy, Allison said after reviewing the letter. No real accusations, just enough pressure to rattle you. They're hoping you blink. I won't, Elena said. But I want it handled by the book. That same day, Linda walked into her office with a pale expression and a clipboard trembling in her hands. You need to see this, she said. It was a printout of the online reviews for Cypress Road Clinic. In 1 week, over 30 new reviews had flooded in, nearly all of them negative. Clients complained about skyrocketing prices, cold service, and being redirected to veterinarians they didn't know. A few mentioned feeling tricked into unnecessary tests. And many ended the same way, we've moved to Redwood. Worth the drive. Elena didn't celebrate. She felt sick. They're unraveling, Naomi said when Elena shared the news later that evening. And they're trying to drag you into the mess with them. But this clinic isn't about revenge, Elena said quietly. It's about rebuilding. Daniel entered then, holding a folder. You need to see this too. Inside was a resume. Then another. Then 4 more. All from technicians and vets currently working at Cypress Road, or recently laid off. They want in, Daniel said. They believe in what we're doing. Elena looked at the stack. She'd need to expand faster than planned. Build more rooms. Hire more hands. Find a way to serve the growing number of people coming to her for more than just care. They were coming for what had been lost elsewhere. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the front door's wind chimes. Elena stood in the doorway and watched the street as dusk settled over Willow Glen. The battle wasn't over. But Redwood Animal Wellness was no longer a response to injustice. It was becoming a movement. By the middle of May, Redwood Animal Wellness had crossed a threshold Elena hadn't dared to imagine when she first walked out of Cypress Road Clinic. 3 months in, they were booking 6 weeks ahead, running a full 5-day surgical rotation, and had added Saturday appointments to meet demand. The clinic's walls were now adorned not just with medical licenses and framed thank you cards, but with portraits of pets donated by grateful clients. Children's drawings spilled onto the break room fridge. A corkboard near the front desk had been unofficially turned into a wall of wellness, pinned with snapshots of recovered animals and joyful updates. But even amid the joy, the strain showed. Elena felt it in the tension behind her eyes after 16-hour days. She saw it in Naomi's shoulders after a 4th consecutive late-night recovery case. And Daniel, ever calm and focused, had started staying long after his shift ended, reviewing charts to ensure nothing slipped. They were managing. But just barely. One Tuesday morning, while Elena was reviewing surgery plans for a bulldog with a throat obstruction, Linda stepped into the room. There's a man asking to speak with you, she said carefully. Client? No. Journalist. Elena put the chart down. Outside, a man in his 40s with a press badge and tired eyes stood by the front window, glancing between his notebook and the door. His name was Caleb Drew. He wrote for a regional outlet known for its sharp business columns and occasional exposés. I've been tracking trends in veterinary ownership, he said after Elena offered him a seat. Yours keeps coming up. I didn't ask for attention, Elena said. I know. That's why it matters. Clients are naming you by name. Your story's being told over kitchen tables, in vet school classes. You walked away from corporate medicine, and people followed. He paused, leaning forward. They say you're changing how care is delivered in this region. That you've triggered a shift. Elena raised an eyebrow. I opened a clinic. You exposed a system, he replied. Even if you didn't mean to. Elena didn't agree to a formal interview. But the next week, a feature ran anyway, The Vet Who Said No, and built a practice that said yes. It wasn't just about Redwood. It was about a wave of disillusionment with corporatized medicine. About trust and transparency. About the idea that some places could still belong to people. Within hours, the phones at Redwood were ringing non-stop. Clients called from counties Elena had never served. Some had already driven in just to ask about transferring records. Rescue shelters reached out asking for partnerships. Even vet tech students from the local university emailed asking for internships. And then came the message she couldn't ignore. A statewide animal welfare foundation wanted to partner. They had grant funds. They wanted to support clinics offering ethical, accessible care, starting with Redwood. Elena stood in the break room holding the letter. Naomi saw her and stopped mid-step. "What is it?" "We've been invited to pilot a new model," Elena said, her voice low. "Grant-supported wellness programs. Subsidized surgeries for senior pet owners. We could hire more staff. Expand faster. Help more." Naomi's smile was slow but fierce. "Then let's do it." But that same afternoon, Elena received another email. This one not so welcoming. It was from a private legal firm. A subtle, veiled warning. They were reviewing conduct involving former clients, staff, and records. The sender didn't need to name Evercare. The letter practically dripped with their language. Elena forwarded the message to Allison King. "Predictable," her attorney replied. "We've seen this before." Empty threats dressed in expensive suits. Still, it unsettled her. That evening, Daniel found her in her office, staring at the screen. "We're doing the right thing," he said. "I know. But doing the right thing doesn't mean it won't be hard." She exhaled. "We need to be ready." Daniel placed a folder on her desk. "We are. We've got policies. Records. Logs. Every transfer documented. They can try whatever they want. But we're not bending." Elena looked at the man who had once sat quietly in the break room of Cypress Road, pushing salad around on his plate while warning her what corporate care could become. Now, he was helping build something that proved the opposite. Later that night, Elena stood alone in the empty reception area. The lights were off. Outside, the parking lot was still and dark. But inside, the place pulsed with everything it had become. She locked the door behind her. The next chapter of Redwood wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about leading. It started with an anonymous tip. Allison King, Elena's lawyer, called on a rainy Thursday afternoon with a low, almost amused tone. "Check your inbox," she said. "Looks like the empire's cracking." Elena opened the forwarded email. It contained an internal memo from Evercare Veterinary Systems, leaked by an employee and passed along through back channels. The document detailed a quarterly review from Cypress Road Clinic and 4 other recently acquired locations. The contents were clinical, but the implications were enormous. Client retention was down 64% at Cypress. Staff turnover had doubled. Revenue had dropped below projected margins. But the most glaring section was titled, Client Sentiment. One sentence stood out, bold and underlined. Primary reason for attrition, perceived loss of trust following departure of Dr. Elena Brooks. Elena read it twice. She felt no triumph. Just a sharp, quiet clarity. That same week, a class action lawsuit surfaced out of Tennessee, another region where Evercare had expanded. Former clients accused the company of aggressive upselling, overbilling, and deceptive bundling of services. The news quickly spread through veterinary circles online, sparking commentary from pet advocates, medical ethicists, and even a few bold veterinarians willing to go public. Redwood Animal Wellness was suddenly not just a clinic, it was a symbol. Local news requested interviews. National veterinary publications asked for op-eds. A podcast producer emailed requesting a segment titled Asterisk, What Happens When Care Comes First. Asterisk. Elena declined them all. I'm not here to be a headline, she told Naomi and Daniel one evening. We don't need to be loud to be real. Still, the attention had ripple effects. Donations poured in for their wellness fund. Local businesses offered to sponsor outreach days. A pet food supplier volunteered a monthly shipment for shelter referrals. More importantly, people kept coming. One morning, Elena walked into the lobby and found an elderly man waiting quietly with a carrier in his lap. I drove from 3 towns over, he said softly. They told me you'd treat my cat like she mattered. She sat down beside him and asked the cat's name. Juniper, he said. She's 16. Her vet said she was too old for a tumor removal. But I read what you did for that husky last month. I thought, maybe you'd look. Elena gently lifted the towel covering the carrier and peered inside. I will, she said. I promise. Behind them, Linda handed a cup of tea to a woman waiting with 2 children and a golden retriever. The scent of lavender from the diffuser mixed with the quiet hum of Naomi's voice in the next room. Daniel passed through the hallway, charts in hand, offering a soft nod as he went. This was care. Not business. Not numbers. Life. That evening, Elena finally called Allison again. Let's talk expansion, she said. Satellite clinic? Her lawyer asked. More than one, Elena replied. They keep asking. People are coming from counties we've never served. We can't turn them away forever. Allison chuckled. You know what you're doing, right? Not really, Elena admitted. But I know what I won't do. The next week, she held the first staff meeting for a new internal team, expansion planning. Naomi would help design patient flow. Daniel would lead hiring protocols. Linda would oversee training for satellite receptionists. They called it the Circle Plan, each new location forming a ring of care, client-first clinics connected not by a name, but a philosophy. One morning, a package arrived with no return label. Inside was a single item, a bronze plaque. Engraved on it were 7 words. Asterisk where care lives. Not where it hides, asterisk. No note. No sender. Elena placed it above the entryway door. She never asked who sent it. She already knew. It was a warm morning in early June when Elena stepped into what used to be a dusty corner lot just outside Asheville's city edge. The windows were still taped with painter's plastic, and the floors smelled of fresh varnish. But the bones were there, the same resilient structure she had seen months ago when everything was still uncertain. This was the site of Redwood's first satellite clinic. Naomi walked beside her, clipboard in hand, pointing out where the intake desk would go, where the oxygen lines would run, where the surgical lights would hang. Daniel trailed behind them with a measuring wheel and a folded blueprint poking out of his back pocket. What do you think? Naomi asked, looking up. Elena smiled. It's perfect. It's us. In the months since Redwood opened, the clinic hadn't just grown, it had become a movement. The Circle Plan was real now. The second location was under construction. A third had just cleared zoning. And more applications rolled in weekly from veterinary professionals tired of being told that care should follow quotas. But Elena never lost sight of what started it. She still worked regular shifts. She still took calls in the middle of the night. She still remembered every patient's name. Every pet drawing still hung in her office. Every thank you card was filed in a drawer she sometimes opened on harder days. One of those harder days had come unexpectedly. Cypress Road Clinic announced its closure. A quiet notice. No press release. No farewell statement. Just a small sign taped to the door, asterisk we regret to inform you that this facility is permanently closed. Please contact Evercare for records assistance, asterisk. Linda had driven by and taken a photo. Elena stared at the image for a long time. The building where she'd started her career was gone, not the bricks, not the walls, but the soul of it. Hollowed out by systems that never understood what truly mattered. It wasn't a victory. It was a reminder. Later that week, Elena received a letter. Handwritten. No envelope. It was left at the front desk. Elena. I see now what I failed to protect. You built what I never dared to dream possible. Thank you for restoring what I thought was lost. Walter Greaves. She folded the letter quietly and slipped it into her pocket. On the evening of the satellite clinic's soft launch, families and their pets gathered outside just like they had on Redwood's first day. Some had driven hours. Some brought candles, treats, flowers. A few former Cypress clients came carrying the same carriers, same leashes, same faces, but no longer afraid. Elena stood by the entrance, just like before. She opened the door and smiled. Welcome home, she said. And the day began. Inside, the wind chimes rang as people entered. The air filled with laughter and barking and movement. Daniel moved from room to room, steady as ever. Naomi adjusted a monitor with gentle precision. Linda trained the new receptionist by example, pointing out how every patient deserved attention before efficiency. Elena took it all in, quietly, completely. She stood behind the desk, looking through the window as the sun dipped below the hills. The sky blushed with gold. The air smelled of clean pine and lavender. This wasn't about survival anymore. It wasn't even about resistance. This was restoration. One clinic. Then another. 1,000 small acts of care, each undoing the myth that medicine must be mechanical. Elena Brooks didn't set out to change anything. She simply refused to forget what mattered. And in doing so, she built something that would outlast her name. Something rooted, growing, and alive. Just like the place it all began. Redwood.